And as Pegasus swarms into view, this is Mike Schlesinger. I am the uncredited writer-producer of the U.S. version of Godzilla 2000, here with two of my compatriots, and we're going to go through the movie scene by scene, tell you all about it, a lot of the changes we made, and hopefully just have some fun. My first decision as producer was to leave the Toho logo on, and I'm glad we did because it always gets a reaction from the audience. In fact, I remember Owen Gleiberman, the film critic for Entertainment Weekly, actually was stunned that the audience would cheer a logo. But it's an important part of the movie and should be kept on. And we jump right in, and let me introduce Mr. Mike Mahoney, the editor of the film, and Mr. Darren Paskal, who is billed as a supervising sound editor, but that grossly understates his contribution to the movie. He really designed all the sound. And I decided, let's have some fun with this picture right off the bat. You know, we don't need titles to just fade in and fade out. Let's animate them, come out of the horizon, trapped in the headlights, whatever. Now we're introducing our three main characters, at least our heroes. The gentleman with the beard is the heroic scientist, Shinoda. He is played by Takahiro Murata, who is a veteran of two previous Godzilla movies and also appeared in several Itami pictures, including A Taxing Woman. And he was looped by a wonderful actor named Francois Chow, who is from Cambodia, actually, and had exactly the kind of nice mid-range voice we needed. We have exposition here. In the original dialogue that we were given, it was very confusing. They never actually said what the Godzilla Production Network was or who these people were, so I had to sit down and sort of rewrite a little bit to make it clear, because after all, this is a picture that appeals mostly to children. The lady there is Yuki, our whiny but likable reporter. She is played by Naomi Nishida, who is an award-winning actress in Japan. Actually won the Japanese Academy Award for Best New Actress, and she's looped by Denise Ikatani, wonderful actress, first person we cast, and she had exactly the kind of nasal whine that the character needs, and she did a fantastic job. Now we're getting into the introduction of our star. By the way, that is a real lighthouse. It's not CGI. They actually went on location for this. And this is a great reveal coming up, perhaps inspired a little bit by The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, which is, of course, the Ray Harryhausen movie that inspired the original Godzilla in the first place. And let me go back to the little girl you saw earlier. Her character is named Io. That's spelled I-O, in case you're taking notes. She's played by Maya Suzuki, who was 11 at the time the picture was shot. This is her first movie. And actually, we'll get back to her in a second. I just want to say this is really nice the way they set this up. Hattori's music here is excellent. And then you see the boat coming into view. And it's really staged very nicely here because you have to remember you're at the top of the lighthouse, so it takes a few seconds for it to sink in that the boat is not on the water. The boat is 100 feet off the ground. And then here comes our star, teeth and everything. And it's a great way to introduce the movie. Now, Michael, you made your first significant editorial decision here where you rearranged a couple scenes. Talk about that. Shifting the scenes around to keep the action continuous.
Yeah, in the Japanese version, they cut away from this to back to the Godzilla Prediction Network, and we decided that it'd probably be better to just leave us here at the lighthouse, right there between those two shots. We cut back to the Godzilla Production Network before, but we just stayed at the lighthouse and thought that we'd stay with Godzilla for a while longer.
Yeah, it really makes the scene more impactful. And here, right off the bat, we're sending a cue to the audience that, boom, this is not to be taken too seriously. It's not going to be a lot of innocent bystanders mush. This is the Buster Keaton gag from Steamboat Bill Jr. and One Week and many other great scenes. Now here's the scene that originally followed the main title, which acts as a buffer to our scene in the restaurant. Now here's a good example of how Darren really kind of beefed up the soundtrack. In the original version, the scene outside the restaurant, there was pretty much no sound except the radio. Now you hear the train going by, you hear the crickets chirping, you hear the refrigerator humming. I mean, just a wealth of detail. And here comes the one line of dialogue. This is an exclusive that's left from the original track.
You clowns don't like this.
Darren liked that line so much we decided to leave it in. The old lady is looped by Amy Hill, who you may remember played the grandmother in the Margaret Cho sitcom All American Girl. I specifically wanted her to do that line, and in fact, when she did her first take, she read it kind of straight, and I said, no, I want you to do it like Grandma. And she says, oh, okay. And she went back and did another take, and it's the one you hear, and everybody on the stage just fell into hysterics. And it's a wonderful example of getting a laugh not by what you say, but how you say it. And there's a little scene of destruction here. Again, as you can see, nobody's really hurt. Talking about Io, the little girl, this is an interesting story also. Rachel Crane is the 14-year-old girl who looped her. We couldn't find an Asian girl to do the part. And, oh, let me interrupt again. There's a wonderful sound effect coming here. You're going to see a boulder come down and hit a metal railing with a great loud thunk. Yeah, just there. You added that. That's really good. I really like that. And now we're actually coming to the first music cue that we added. J. Peter Robinson was the composer we hired to beef up the score a little bit. And in the original version, there was no music in this scene. And we said, just write something kind of short and eerie, sort of set up kind of an impending sense of dread. And that's what he did. And I think the scene really plays much better this way. Go! Anyway, to finish up the Rachel Crane story, Jimmy Honore, the head of post-production at Sony, said, we know this girl, she's a professional looper. In fact, her mother runs a loop group, and she'd be perfect for the little girl. So we figured, well, let's give her a shot. So we brought her in, handed her a page, and she absolutely nailed it cold. And we said, okay, you're our Io. And she did a phenomenal job, as you'll hear. This is some really nice stuff here. Very good lighting here. Really sets the mood. Darren added some roars here. Actually, Godzilla was not roaring in the original version.
Yeah, we added a lot of the roars and the texture of Godzilla to make him come into like a new era of Godzilla.
Right, footsteps especially. There were a lot of scenes that didn't have footsteps in there. Some people thought this kind of ripped off Jurassic Park, but I think anytime you're dealing with any kind of a large reptile in a motor vehicle, there's going to be some similarity. The broken glass is CGI, incidentally. Now, this is a really exciting scene here, one of the best in the picture. I mean, when you see the feet come crashing through the tunnel, I mean, that's, especially on a big screen, that's really just top-notch work. And again, Darren just loaded up some sound effects here. I mean, notice how when the boulders fall through the broken windshield, you actually hear them thunking on the dashboard. Mike made an interesting little cut here. In the original version, the SUV actually fishtails around, so it's facing away from the tunnel, but in the next shot it was facing back again, so we had to cut the fishtail to make the shot match. Nice perspective shot there. And enter Miyasaka. This is by far, to me, the most interesting and complex character in the piece, and he really is the hinge on which the human story revolves, or I guess not revolves, not the word, rotates, I don't know. My mind is going. But revolves, I guess. But here is Katagiri, our villain. Again, there was no exposition in this scene originally. A lot of cryptic dialogue about level 3. And so when you see the submarine later on, people were basically hopelessly lost. So we rewrote it to make it exactly right up front. Hey, there's a meteorite. We found it. And here is Godzilla on a rampage. This is the traditional Godzilla scene that you see in most movies. People screaming, buildings being crushed. The real team was our loop group, and they did a phenomenal job. Wendy Hoffman, Richard Janon, and Debbie K. Stratton run it. And there were basically 10 people, plus me and Glenn Shin, who was our voice caster and ADR director. So there were basically 12 of us, and as you can see, they did an incredible job of sounding like an awful lot more. And Darren's sound effects, again, really bringing the scene to life. There's a lot of red backlighting in this, in a lot of the Godzilla scenes, which I think is a very nice effect, especially on the big screen.
And once again, it's It's not scary for the kids, really. It's more fun.
Right. It's fantasy violence, as they like to say. And you'd have to be like really under 6 to be scared by this. And kids today are a lot more sophisticated, and they know it's not real. Hattori's music is really nice here, especially the strings at this little piece here. And I remember when we first did this one shot coming up where they're driving parallel to Godzilla, and I think the sound of the car you put in was like, what, 1962 Cougar or something? Exactly. It's like really an old rattle trap. And it was funny, but we thought, no, I think we need something a little bit more serious than that.
Keep that antenna steady.
The nice thing about the relationship between Shinoda and Yuki is that they don't pursue a conventional romance, which is kind of fun, and they sort of keep it on a bickering, bantering level. And this gave us a chance to do some nice screwball back and forth.
Like an old married couple.
Exactly, very much so. And in fact, again, there was a lot of dated slang in the picture. When she gets pissed off in a minute from now, the original line was, "Oh, men." Which is, I guess, fine for a Doris Day movie, but, not today. So I changed it to "Oh, Bite Me," which was sort of a little tribute to my personal trainer, because I always tell her that when she pushes me too hard. I love this shot. This is one of the best shots in the movie. Beautifully done. Again, the red backlighting, and you really get a sense of Godzilla's size in this thing.
And how it's kicking up the earth. Or
exactly.
The buildings around him. You can see debris flying every once in a while.
Now, it's interesting that there seems to be a continuity error here. It's odd because, we just saw Godzilla chasing them, and now Godzilla is in front of them. And it's like, at what point did he pass them? Some people might be inclined to think that we made that mistake, but no, we didn't. That's the way it was. We made no changes here. Again, the music here is very nice and tapers off, and that's a great perspective shot of Godzilla as he's trashing the power plant. Tsutomu Kitagawa, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, is in the Godzilla suit. This is his first turn as that monster, although he did play King Ghidorah in Rebirth of Mothra 3. He's a former gymnast and actually worked with Sonny Chiba's stunt team for about 20 years before he came over to Toho. You made a nice little cut here, Mike. Rearranged some shots so you actually juxtapose the close-up of Yuki with the close-up of Godzilla at the end of the scene.
It's sort of her first real close experience with Godzilla.
Sort of implying that there's a Fay Ray King Kong connection there. There actually isn't, but it is nice. Now we're down to the submarine. And again, because we have now set up that there is a meteorite down there, it's a lot clearer than it was before. Because I remember some of the early screenings, people were saying, what the heck is going on here? Miyasaka, who is in the sub on the left, is played by Shiro Sano, who is probably the most veteran actor in the cast. He's also a writer-director. He is looped by Jack Ong, who is another great Asian American actor. And he's quite a piece of manpower. In addition to being an actor, he's also an ordained minister, and he's the affirmative action director of the Screen Actors Guild. So we were really lucky to have him, and he did a great job. His voice had exactly the kind of wispy tenor that I think Miyasaka needs, since he is obviously a little bit of a nerd, but good-hearted. The guy in the rear with the baseball cap, the character is named Goto. He is Miyasaka's assistant. I don't know the name of the actor who plays him, but he is looped by Ping Wu, who you may remember from several episodes of Seinfeld. He was the Chinese takeout delivery boy who instigated a lawsuit. This is a really nice scene. I think we probably let it run too long. We probably could have tightened it up a little bit, but we just it's beautiful. We just hated the little, touch it.
Also, the light is the thing that activates the meteor.
Right. So this is a key point here, although we don't realize that until later. That is, in fact, this shot we're looking at right now, that's basically the eye of the meteorite as it sort of wakes up. But we don't actually realize that until later. Now we're in the newspaper office, and Yuki fighting with her editor. The character's named Ishii. He's looped by Dana Lee, a terrific actor, very substantial, tends to play generals and things, and he had just the right weight we needed. And he actually loops 3 small roles in this picture. This is the first. This was a tough scene because the actor in the original track is speaking very slowly. So I had to write like 2 more sentences just to get him up to tempo, and it's one of the worst lip matches in the picture, but there really wasn't that much we could do about it. A lot of the critics who reviewed this picture seem to think that the Godzilla Production Network consisted solely of Shinoda and his daughter, and they obviously weren't paying attention, because here's the first of 3 scenes where they are actually talking to other members of the network. And now we're coming up to our big comedy scene where Yuki goes back to the office and encounters the 2 Stooges. Glenn Shin is voicing the guy with the pole, and yours truly is the guy who gets hit with the pole. And once again, this scene did not have music originally. We asked JP to do a little kind of Laurel and Hardy type theme just to juice it up a little bit, and Darren upped the sound effects, and it actually plays much funnier. Again, it's a sort of little grace note that other people might have cut out, but it's kind of fun, so we figured, what the heck, leave it in. We made our first substantial cut right after this. There was Yuki, about 30 seconds of her wandering through the warehouse trying to get to the office. It was basically dead footage, and we got rid of it. And we also clipped the opening of the scene where she comes into the office, and Shinoda and Io basically ignored her. And we took that out because it really made them come across as kind of unsympathetic. And besides, Yuki is taking so much abuse in this picture anyway. We figured, why add to it? This is a nice scene here because it really emphasizes the reversal of roles. Io consistently puts Yuki down, calls her an imbecile. We made a running gag out of that. And but it's nice to watch as the movie progresses how their relationships gradually switch until by the end of the picture, Yuki has basically become the traditional mother role, and Io has become the daughter. This was the scene originally where they learned about the meteorite. I rewrote it to bring on that, hey, it could be fossil fuel reduction. Because the CCI isn't necessarily an evil organization, and Katagiri is not really a villain per se. He's just doing what he thinks is right because, he's kind of young and ambitious, and he's just, really misguided. Although we did try to make him a little bit more colorfully snide. He was sort of an evil bureaucrat. Not an evil bureaucrat, sort of a flat, faceless bureaucrat. And we tried to make him a little more snide, a little more evil, in the kind of great Champagne tradition. Katagiri is played by Hiroshi Abe, who, if he looks like a male model, that's because he once was. And a lot of people also said he looks like an anime character come to life, which is very true because he has those big round eyes. And he spends most of the picture glowering. Which I thought was very clever and a nice performance there. And he is looped by a wonderful actor named Ron Ewan, who he was the last actor we cast. We were really desperate to find somebody who had that proper James Shigeta-like baritone. And then Glenn thought of Ron literally like 2 days before we started recording, and we met for lunch at Solly's in Sherman Oaks. And the minute he said, "Nice to meet you," I said, "I think we found our guy." And he really wrapped himself around the character of Katagiri, especially that scream he does at the end of the picture. And he really got into it beautifully and gave a wonderful vocal performance. And incidentally, his brother is Roger Ewan, who was the muscle heavy in Shanghai Noon. And now is the first indication that something is amiss, and this rock is not just any ordinary rock. Some nice CGI work here, although some audiences did tend to laugh at the ships since they were obviously computer generated. Now we're coming to a nice little grace note I put in. You listen in the background, you were going to hear an audio clip from the movie Earth versus the Flying Saucers. Originally it was a weather report, and I think we needed something a little bit better than that. And Paul Frees is the voice of the alien. And Frees, of course, was the iconic voice of 50s science fiction. And I wanted to get him in the picture somehow because he also dubbed a lot of Toho movies. So we put that in. It also makes a nice foreshadowing because he's talking about surviving aliens about to take over the Earth. And also we wanted to tip our hat to Ray Harryhausen, who actually turned 80 while we were doing the picture. And of course, The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms was the direct inspiration for Godzilla. One thing we also had, and this was Mike's idea, is you may have heard Io say, "I don't hear that cabbage being chopped." Originally, he just set the magazine down and just arbitrarily started chopping. And Mike said we should do that, so we just wrote the line and had her say it off camera, and it actually works very well.
Little role reversal kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Joke.
Again, she is in fact still playing the mother.
Right.
Our Foley person that did an amazing job, Dan O'Connell, I'd like to give him a little credit. He's an amazing
Absolutely,
Foley.
yeah. There's so many, and only I think maybe a third of the people who worked on this picture actually got listed in the end credits. And now Glenn makes a very brief return. That little ditty he's singing, "Summer Vacation," actually is a real song. We thought it was just something that they had ad-libbed, but no, it's real. And JP's little Laurel and Hardy theme comes back. This is a very nicely directed scene by Okawa. He keeps it in one shot, and there's all kinds of action. I love the way the camera kind of bananas around here. So while they're fiddling around in the background, here's Io pulling up the phone and dialing, and then we're in the next scene with Yuki. The character in the back is the guy who looks like an aging hippie. The character is named Chemical, and Pingwu dubbed him too. And we thought it would be fun to rewrite his dialogue like an aging hippie, so that's why he says "later, baby" instead of "goodbye," which is what it was originally.
Throughout, he's pretty.
Yes, yeah, we had a lot of fun with that character. And more abuse for Yuki. The original line was, "This is daylight robbery," and of course, it's nighttime. So I think they meant highway robbery. But it was fun. We were able to make a running gag out of sharing expenses. Then the not paying for a gas line will also show up later. And now we're back into some exposition, and we're, it's beginning to dawn on everybody now that there might be an alien in there. The funny thing here is that Ron Ewan has a natural tendency to speak in a sort of a John Wayne-like cadence. And several times during the recording session, we had to ask him to do another take because the last one was too dooky. But we decided to leave one of those in, and it's upcoming. It's because it seemed to fit the moment, sort of like heading for a showdown. So the John Wayne voice kind of fit. Some people wondered if we had done that deliberately, and no, because obviously if it had been deliberate, we would have done it all the way through the picture, and secondly, we wouldn't have done it anyway, because it really just would have taken people out of the picture. There's no real reason for him to sound like John Wayne. Here it is.
Spotted him. Moving south near Ibaraki. You stay here for now.
That's very funny. Sometimes you wondered, should we have done that? But yeah, it was funny. We left it in.
Here's the next one.
And yes, here we are.
Oh, that's just lovely.
And now we're getting into a little action as Godzilla is coming in from the ocean. Again, a lot of the critics would say, why is there a Godzilla Prediction Network? Can't they tell when he's just stomping on buildings? And I thought we made it excruciatingly clear that Godzilla mostly travels under the ocean and that the network is there to predict when and where he will come ashore. And now is a perfect example of that. He is coming ashore. He's headed for the nuclear plants.
And the heat of the water.
Right.
There's another note there.
Darren, great stuff here. I mean, again, you just fill the screen with sound here. All the screaming and the yelling and the sounds. There's not much of it here.
The government is holding an emergency cabinet meeting, and they're sending the army to the presumed landing spot.
Here comes, I love the way Denise reads this line about, don't you think it's a little too close? She puts a little tremble in her voice at the end.
I need to be as close as possible.
That's a great reading. The radio announcer you just heard was Marilyn Tokuda, who is a mover and shaker with the East-West Players and also the LA Conservancy. Marilyn is a very beautiful woman with a great voice, and she has a tendency to get typecast as reporters, usually playing that token Asian-American female reporter reporting live from the scene. So we decided to extend that. So every time you hear a female reporter in this picture, it's Marilyn's voice. Fortunately, she was a good sport about it. Now, this is the first instance we had of directional dialogue. You probably won't be hearing it on the video, but if you ever have a chance to see this in the theater, you'll hear it. You will hear Katagiri's voice coming out of the right side of the screen. I just felt that, we live in these days of 8-channel glory. Why must the dialogue always come out of the center of the screen? If someone's standing on the right side of the screen, let the dialogue come out of the right side of the screen. And John Taylor, our dialogue mixer, thought it was kind of odd. He says, nobody does that anymore. And I said, right, that's one reason why I wanted to do it. And we did it in several scenes where it seemed appropriate, and I thought it was very effective.
And in the meantime, he just levels toes.
Here's Ron just gloating.
That's why I created the network. He must be contained. I realize that.
Again, this is a key thing because in the original track there was no mention of the fact that Shinoda and Miyazaki had a history, that they were old college buddies. We found that out from the original continuity. So I specifically rewrote that dialogue to bring that into effect. And then we added the line about I'll send flowers, which will come back to haunt him later. And here's our last major character, General Takata, played by Takeo Nakahara, and he is looped by a fine gentleman named Jim Ishida. I wanted to get away from the usual roaring baritone that you find with most generals. He has this great raspy nasal quality that fit the character but was not a stereotypical voice, and he did a great job. Jim is very dapper. Of all the people we had looping this picture, he's the only one who showed up in a suit. This is the quiet before the storm. Again, Darren did the papers falling off the table and everything rattling. None of that was there before. And here comes Ping back.
It's moving!
Now coming up here is a really great example of what a terrific editor Mike is. The scene is essentially the same as it was in the original version, but we shifted shots around. There's a scene where you'll see Miyazaki turn his head, and then you see right here, the sun coming on the horizon. That shot was originally in another place, but by moving it to where it is now, it lets the audience figure out that the rock is responding to the sunlight. Whereas much later in the original version, you had to sort of figure that out for yourself.
Right, it was very hard to figure out. It was very...
Yeah.
It was really difficult. Placing it there, you just see him look off and you see what he's looking at, and you can make the connection a little bit better.
Yeah.
Especially with the diagram that we see before or coming up, where we see the angle of the sun is really what makes the rock get motivated to move.
Yeah. No, it's a brilliant example of terrific editing and using editing to tell the story. JP came in here with some military music. By the way, I didn't realize this until I saw this at a screening at the Motion Picture Academy. Those tanks are CGI. They are not real. I mean, they did use real tanks in some scenes, but most of them are computer generated. And all the times I'd watched this movie, I hadn't realized until I saw it on a big enough screen and was sitting close enough to realize that a lot of this isn't real.
It's pretty well done. There's a wide shot of the beach, and I never knew either whether they have probably
but you
about
can sort
50
of tell
tanks.
because when they all stop, they sort of all lurch in the same way. You'll see it right here.
Right.
Again, this was a perfect example of how we tighten the picture. Most of those shots went on way longer than they are now. You know, you don't need 15 seconds of tanks rolling when 5 is sufficient.
Yeah, we probably took 30 seconds of tanks rolling out of that scene. I think it still works.
Now here's our big briefing scene with the 2 lines of dialogue that we cribbed from George C. Scott that everybody loves so much. You know, the original line was something like, we've taken it into account and minimized. And then one day I was just barking at the screen, the Dr. Strangelove line, and Mike laughed, and he said, why don't you use it? You know, it fits, and it gets a little bit of a laugh. And then the crap through a goose line, which comes later, is from Patton from his famous opening speech. And again, it was just a matter of taking a rather standard line, which in this case was, I guarantee not even Godzilla will be able to stop it, and just replacing it with something a little bit more lively and colorful. I mean, there's not a lot of dialogue in this movie, and every line has to count. The gentleman in the dark gray suit on the left is a character named Gano. He is played by Takeshi Obayashi, who actually was in Shogun 20 years ago, playing a character called Urano, and he's just a veteran character actor. We never really figured out what he was. He's obviously a government bureaucrat, obviously in a position of some power, but he certainly seems subservient to Katagiri. So, but he basically seems to have his heart in the right place, which is pretty unusual for most government characters. He's the second character dubbed by Dana Lee. Now, that first mine explosion was actually matted in. These are miniatures, though, and you can tell a slight difference. And they were back to the miniatures. And Godzilla is about to make his first battle attack. And again, this is the first instance where we've really changed the music. In the original version, it was the theme, the main theme that we've heard several times already. But for some reason, Hattori did it at a much slower tempo, and it really didn't quite have the fury and the intensity that a scene like this needed. So we asked JP to write something a little bit more appropriate, and as you can hear, he responded terrifically.
He really did a great job of matching the new music to the existing music.
Because technically we had 3 composers, because in addition to Hattori and JP, there were also the original cues by Akira Ifukube. And JP worked very hard on trying to blend everything so it didn't sound like it was 3 different composers. Again, these were tightened considerably from what they were originally. Someone thought that lock-on target fire at will was stolen from Star Wars, but I think that I hardly think that originated with that movie. You've heard that in 100 different pictures. Now again, these are practical effects. They're not CGI. They're just, you know, small explosive squibs. And the low angle sort of emphasizes the size. This is a really nice scene because, as you can see, it's daylight. They're out there in the open, and there's a tendency to do these things at night because, you know, the darkness can cover up a multitude of sins. But they decided to do it. Of course, there's a sin right there. That is not one of the better blue screen shots in the picture.
That's a great shot. We could easily have cut that out and lost a really not the best visual effect, but I think. Yeah. It's part of the fun of Godzilla to leave those kind of things in there.
Right. We really, you know, there was great fear in the fandom that we were going to treat this the way some of the Jackie Chan movies have been treated. You know, rip out half an hour and slap, you know, rap and metal onto the soundtrack. And I said, no, we're going to respect the integrity of this movie as much as we can. We really didn't cut any major scenes out. We really just tightened it. The great director Don Siegel, who started as an editor, had a rule. He said you could shake a movie and 10 minutes will fall out. And that's exactly what we did. We shook this movie and 9 minutes came out, and we hardly lost any dialogue at all. And very little Godzilla footage. That's a nice angle. They redesigned the suit for this picture, and as you notice, the dorsal fins, several of them are longer and spikier than they were in the past. I think they did a good job on the redesign. His arms are longer, more mobile, and also his head is more proportionate. And the last few prior to this, his head was much smaller. It was almost like a pinhead, and it really seemed kind of freakishly small. I think this is really one of the handsomest of all the Godzilla suits that they've designed. And that suit weighs 188 pounds. That's a nice shot.
With the music, everything kind of ties together.
Right. And then we thought it would be fun because we've sort of built up these missiles. We thought, let's pull back the music and we'll just have the sort of the hum of the tank engines. Actually, these two shots of Shinoda getting off his bike were actually two different places during the movie, but we found they cut together practically perfectly, and it seemed like a better way to go.
And this scene has like over 250 effects happening at once, always.
Yeah. Now this is again computer generated. At least the missiles are. The explosive effects are real. But boy, you can really feel those things hit.
Once again, Dan O'Connell really gave some good gush to the hits, along with some effects of it.
Yeah. In the original track, they were just kind of like, which was odd because it actually seemed more painful because it wasn't that loud boom, and then and you almost kind of felt, oh yuck, and then but when you make it the louder explosion, it somehow seems less real and therefore not as painful. Those are nice. This is a really nicely put together scene.
I like the next one where we follow the
right under the bridge,
under the bridge.
The missile cam shot. That's really well done.
Once again, it's a fun movie. It's not
absolutely
made to make you feel like.
Following the sun.
Now here's a perfect example of again trying to make the dialogue a little more lively. When they get up on the deck, Gato says, "If it keeps moving, what will happen?" Which is what Miyasaka just said. A normal person would say, "Don't just stand there, move the boat." So that's what he says, and it gets a laugh, and it's appropriate. This is a scene where whatever's inside is examining the DNA, and there will be a reason for this, which comes up later. And again, newly created sound effects, very nice. Now, we made an interesting cut coming up. Godzilla, coming up very quickly, powers up. His dorsal fins light up, and then, he's going to get ready to shoot his radioactive breath, and then he never does. And it seemed like a mistake, and we thought, well, if we leave this in, people are going to think we cut the radioactive breath, and people who aren't familiar are going to wonder what the hell was going on. And then the second time he powers up, it won't have the impact. So we thought, well, but if we cut it out, there's still 2 or 3 shots that we can't take out, where his dorsal fins are still lit up.
Yeah, if you look closely, it's kind of hard to tell, but you can
Yeah.
sort of see his dorsal fins lighting up, and then we cut out of it.
Yeah.
We cut out of it as soon as we could, but there was some action that we needed to keep in. You'll see what happens.
Right. It was definitely the lesser of two evils. They
Yeah.
were long shots, especially that shot where the 6 jets come at him. You'll see it very soon, and then they sort of do that Blue Angels thing up. Again, that was a CGI shot, but it was really nice, and we didn't want to lose it. But here you can
Right
see
here, it's lit up,
the fins
but
are lit.
it's sort of shrouded in fog and smoke, so you can't really tell.
Yeah.
And you really also should only do that when you
Right.
really,
Yeah.
not against these jets. I mean, it should happen against the actual UFO.
Right. Exactly.
Got a kitty.
It's Miyasaka.
The rock's gone. It just flew away.
I think we should mention Kenji Suzuki here, who is a director of special effects, and that's a nice little touch where it sort of just skirts the water there.
And also how we kind of brought to life our alien. That
Yeah, that very retro sound effect you use with the woo woo woo. Because we did want to sort of, keep, tip our hat back to the old days as much as we could. I mean, it is Godzilla 2000, but we don't want to disrespect the past either. And here's where you really get a sense of the enormity of the thing, because this is the first time you see it in relationship to Godzilla or anything before. The critic for the Washington Post had a great line. He said it was someone. There's a later line where someone says, "You see that big flying rock go by?" And he says, "No, what rock? You mean the one as big as the Shinjuku Hill?" And the alien has figured out that Godzilla has got the DNA he needs, and now we're going to have some serious ass-kicking here. Now we're back to Hattori's music again. That's a wonderful shot. Nice and close. You really get a good feeling for Godzilla's features. Bang. Some good wire work here. Again, you really sort of need to see this in a theater to really appreciate a scene like that. The enormity of it just smashing down on you. Now here's the first real power up.
Yeah,
And I love
this is
that-
where it should happen.
Yeah. I love the way he sort of like flings his head back and lets fly,
he whips it,
Yeah, exactly
whips
right.
that fire out.
That's great. And the breath effect is much better than it had been in the past.
I picked this up for next to nothing.
There's always a train. There's always innocent bystanders.
Holy crap!
Typical Godzilla scene. And as you can see, part of it has been blasted away, exposing the metal. Here comes the line everybody hates.
See that flying rock go by? It's unbelievable.
I mean, come on, folks. It's a rhetorical question. He doesn't really expect an answer. Here again, this is a very long scene that we tightened considerably. And again, no music. We asked JP to just write something kind of pastoral and a little bit eerie to sort of carry it through. He did a very nice job here with the harps. I mean, I think he was actually standing there for like 7 or 8 seconds before he starts walking again.
And
we
he
really
was sort of in this little
tightened
pensive state there for a while, but it just wouldn't
Yeah.
work for American audiences. They'd get up and
yeah.
grab some popcorn and come back, and he'd
Yeah.
still be standing there.
They actually used bulldozers to excavate that footprint. And here's something, again, this shot originally went on a little bit longer too, and we tightened it and then overlapped some dialogue. Now, coming up in the next briefing scene, someone, in fact, it's me again, my voice, says, visitor from outer space? Just too crazy to believe. And, oh, please, there's monsters running around. The normal person would say, right, like Godzilla's normal, so we had Miyasaka say that. The trouble is everybody's laughing at the first line and never hear him say that. Now watch closely, he does this little thing here by sticking his tie in his jacket. This is the kind of mensch that Shiro Sano is. He got that gesture from Takeshi Shimura, who starred in many Kurosawa films like Ikaru and Seven Samurai, but he also played the lead scientist in the very first Godzilla movie back in '54, and that was sort of his tribute to him, much the same way as John Wayne in The Searchers kind of puts his hand on his elbow like Harry Carey Sr. used to do. And that's probably the only time that The Searchers and Godzilla 2000 will ever be mentioned in the same sentence. Mike did a nice thing there a moment ago where originally he was describing the meteor coming, and then they stopped, and then we saw the shot, and you overlapped the dialogue onto the scene. It picked up the pace immeasurably.
Yeah, there were a lot of instances where there was nothing that was overlapped, and in American movies we do that all the time. So I guess in Japanese movies they don't. So we saved a lot of time there. We took out about 9 minutes, and probably 3 or 4 minutes was just overlapping dialogue where we thought it was appropriate.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one way you can shorten a movie without cutting lines. Just, you don't need to see the actor necessarily say the line. If we had wanted to make this What's Up Tiger Lily, someone was it you, Mike, who had to find Takata up here saying the Air Force is still sweeping the area? We thought of inserting a shot showing Air Force guys with brooms out on the runway.
Sweeping the area, yeah.
But no, we didn't want to do that. And here again, JP's military theme returns to add a little life to some second unit stuff. Again, this went on a lot longer in the Japanese version than it does here, but we thought the point had been made. We could have been more ruthless probably, but I really wanted to try and keep as much of the people and the story as we can, because that's, otherwise it's just monsters crashing in the buildings, and then the human stories are interesting. And you want to give as much of that as you can. If you just start ruthlessly cutting out scenes just because they don't advance the story or they're not action, I think ultimately you really harm the film.
Yeah, also we could have cut this really, really tight and turned it into, Independence Day or Men in Black, something really tight, but that's not really the style of the movie it is.
Right.
And we really did keep it in the Godzilla style. Like Mike said from the very beginning, that was our main objective.
Yes, preserve the integrity, even enhance it. Nice little computer sounds there. Again, very old-fashioned, very 50s, but it's a nice touch.
I'd love to know what's in there.
I'd love to know about its power source.
It could be centuries before we came up with something close to this.
Ron is so great. He really puts that swagger in his voice. Matches him perfectly. One of the things I was trying to do in voice casting was I wanted to make sure that not only all the actors, sounded the voice matched the actor, but also that they sounded different from each other. So children especially could match, hear the voice because they're used to watching cartoons, and their ears are perhaps better accustomed than their eyes. So the voice, they could instantly clue in on who everybody is. And there's Marilyn again, being the ever faithful reporter.
She really was very good at that. She ad-libbed some stuff, and it just came out first take perfect.
Collect some materials and you can get some photos, okay?
Denise is terrific.
Still not paying for
She
gas.
really is just absolutely crackerjack.
Hey, that's odd.
What?
My laptop came on by itself.
Sure you didn't just leave it on?
Yeah.
There's a little Sony product placement.
Yeah, a coincidence, I'm sure, but
Yes.
we were happy to have it nonetheless. And as you can see, 1999. There were a few stray. Oh, we'll get back to that later. There they up on the catwalk. This is a really interesting scene in terms of Miyazaka's relationship with Shinoda. You'll notice at the end of the scene when Shinoda agrees to the deal, which is obviously not a really good one, Miyazaka reacts in surprise. And again, it's one of those things that doesn't make any sense unless you know that they have this backstory. And it was really important that, there it is, that we really put that stuff back in.
Come on, we're going back to Tokyo.
Because the relationships are what are going to carry this picture along. There is, unhappily, a very long midsection, about 35 minutes, where Godzilla is off screen, and there wasn't really anything we could do about it. I mean, we had tried to move some Godzilla footage to the middle of the picture, but it was vetoed, and you obviously have to respect the director's wishes. So that's one reason why we kept saying Godzilla as much as we could in that 35-minute section. It's sort of like Bela Lugosi and Dracula. He's not on camera all that much, but if you keep saying his name, it sort of keeps him in the action, at least, to your ear, if not to your eyes.
Are you gonna help me with it?
And again, this is a perfect example of the kind of character stuff that somebody else might have cut, you know. But, you know, the father-daughter relationship is important, and we wanted to leave it in.
Here's a good example of overlapping dialogue. That wasn't overlapped at all. I mean, it's just a little 2 or 3 second thing, but in the original version, he put the films up on the light box, and then we cut out, and then he starts explaining. But I think it flows a little bit easier when he's talking about it while he's doing it.
Sure. We don't need to see him saying every single word, especially since its back is to the camera.
Look, every layer of skin, every cell, every blood vessel. They're all intact.
This is now. This is really the beginning of Miyazaka's sort of a reawakening. That he is beginning to realize that he has backed the wrong horse. You know, he knows Shinoda's right, but Katagiri is still his paycheck. But this scene and the one that immediately follows are really pivotal in this picture. And I love the fact it's like they're back in college. They're 2 little boys just running off to play with the microscope, and Yuki, realizing that her gender excludes her, just picks up her bag and leaves. The music here
not
is
really
very
even
nice.
her gender, but
Yeah.
she's not a scientist like them.
Right.
She doesn't get that goose like they do.
Yeah, but she could hang around and, you know, and observe and maybe even learn. But she knows, you know, it's the boys' club. It's a nice touch, and the music here is very good too. Hattori is really good on the soft stuff, on the pretty things. It really enhances this oddball little scene.
Look at that.
How does he manage to regenerate his cells so quickly?
Now, here was a translation error. In the original version, Shinoda calls it Organizer G1, but, you know, organize means to sort or arrange, and it really didn't seem appropriate, so we called it Regenerator G1, and seemed to make a little appropriate. But I just look at Sano's face. I mean, he's really digging this. I mean Miyazaka, it's almost like he has his own rebirth as well.
It's definitely igniting him.
Yeah. Look at that. He's a terrific actor. Again, really nice mood-setting use of the clouds there.
The clouds are clearing, sir.
Yes, I know.
Here comes one of those classic examples of someone saying something, you know, it's not going anywhere, and of course we know exactly what's going to happen next.
If Regenerator G1
And here we are back in again with Miyazaka just realizing, you know, more and more that, you know, he's on the wrong team. I remember one guy on the news group said he knew Miyazaka was gay by the way he held his coffee cup, you know. And you look at this and you think, my God, people must be lying awake nights thinking this stuff up. Because I never got anything like that. In the original track, Miyazaka says here, I feel like I'm back at the university. It almost seemed like it was a deliberate attempt to obliterate their backstory. So naturally we changed it to we're back together at the university. And we can see here Shinoda is a man of principle. Denise Kumagai is looping this lady. Denise runs a loop group called Tower of Babel, which specializes in Asian, Hispanic, and Black loopers. And she worked with Glenn on providing most of the actors for this thing. And you probably remember Denise from the sitcom Night Court. She played Charlie Robinson's Vietnamese wife.
Do you want to explain what a looper is?
A looper, basically, looping is replacing dialogue. The difference between dubbing and looping is that dubbing would basically be you're changing the language. Looping is replacing something that is already in that language, but perhaps was badly recorded, or like an airplane went overhead, or the acoustics are bad. And because we weren't dubbing this from Japanese and English, there was an English track which we redid. I really think that we were looping rather than dubbing. Although you could go either way in this case. And the cables are not holding, ladies and gentlemen.
Those things were unbreakable.
Abe is great here because this guy is just so sure of himself and he just watches everything blow up in his face. But he's always scowling. The reviews on this were very funny because people were trying to think of all kinds of things to describe this. Bicycle seat, bedpan. I thought it kind of looked like Aladdin's lamp a little bit.
I like the bicycle seat.
Yes, that seemed to be the winner. And again, there's that wonderful sound effect. Now, we just asked JP to reprise his little comic theme for just a couple of bars to emphasize the humorous nature of them beating it after EO has slipped Miyasaka the phony discs.
The UFO just flew away again.
Now we're back to Hattori's music. This is a very nice shot. You really get the perspective of the thing. There's actually a lot of CGI in these sequences because there's a great amount of traffic in Japan, as you might imagine. So they actually had to erase a lot of cars, so it didn't seem quite as busy as it was.
How can it still be alive after so long?
Here again, I decided to plant one of those lines. I had Shinoda say, "Good Lord, I just hope it's friendly." And then, of course, 8 seconds later, they start blowing up helicopters. But, you know, it's a cliche, but again, we didn't want to take this too seriously. Originally, there was a shot of Katagiri telling the other copters to pull back, but we thought it would be more effective to take that line out, so that way he seems more surprised when the thing does start blowing up the choppers. Right there.
Yeah, there was a line with him saying, helicopter 3, pull back, and then cut to helicopter 3.
Here's a great edit we made.
Helicopter 3 is going to blow up.
If you saw that cab crash in the white car, that was immediately followed by the same white car crashing into the cab, even the license plate. So naturally, we had to remove that. Here comes my big scene, the one that puzzled everybody.
Gott Himmel!
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I am the first person to put Yiddish in a Godzilla movie. Thank you very much. Originally, this scene was intercut with 2 radio newscasters who were basically just sitting at a desk telling us stuff we already knew. And it was unnecessary, so we just took it out. It's the only really major cut in the picture.
Great Caesar's ghost!
There's another widely amusing line. Originally, when Ishii saw the saucer, he said, "Jesus Christ!" And we took that out because, A, we really didn't think there are religious groups that don't like to hear that kind of language in a family film. And B, Japan is a Shinto nation. People there don't use Jesus Christ as an expletive. So we were trying to think of something to replace it. So what's a famous line spoken by an editor? And Great Caesar's Ghost came to me in about 2 seconds. And it always gets a laugh.
Why don't we tell everyone where it's from?
Well, I figured everybody knew. It's Perry White in the Superman TV series.
There we go.
Denise is great here. "Stop pawing me, it's the scoop of the century." Did a wonderful job there.
This is a new music cue, too, and I think it really works.
Yes, right, again,
for
no
blasting
music
through
here.
that door.
Gives us the mood of something happening.
Without question. And the military theme is back as the army swoops into action. Again, the Walla is really terrific here. I mean, you're talking basically 7 guys. Obviously, Darren, you had to keep redoing it over and over again to make it sound like a lot more.
Right. The toughest part was probably the amount of time that we had to do all of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were on a hideously short schedule. I think we completely did this in well under 2 months. Because a lot of times we would do things, we had to do everything on a step approval basis with Toho. So we basically would do one thing and we have to wait to hear back from Tokyo that they approved it before we would go on to the next step.
Let's do whatever we can to destroy it quickly.
Here's another area
Thank
where
God
we
it's
use the
going to be
placement
dark
mics
soon.
for different
That
speakers.
gives us
Yeah.
a few hours to plan a course of action.
What's tomorrow's forecast?
And the lighting in this scene is really nice, really sets an ominous mood, which matches basically what's going on outside. I especially like the silhouette shot of the ship on top of City Tower, which is coming up. Again, that red-black lighting. And now there's a complementary color. We go right to kind of a bluish green, and here's a lovely CGI shot of the only real CGI shot of Godzilla in the entire picture. And this is really the first time we've seen him in about a half an hour. The crowd, noisy as usual. Here's Ping Wu again doing the second guy. The first dude is Rodney Kageyama, who's a terrific actor, a man of 1,000 voices. He can do pretty much any accent. He must have done 8 or 10 bits in this thing, and had a different voice for each one. And one of the Loop group was this 19-year-old kid named Jonathan who spoke fluent Russian. So he actually wrote out some reporter copy and then, translated in Russian and read it. And you can hear it at one point during the movie. During this long pan where we've got all the reporters. There's Marilyn again. And we call this guy the guy from the Fox News Channel because he was so tabloid in his delivery.
City Tower, completely immobile, looking down on us as if to challenge mankind for rulership of this planet.
And basically what he's saying is pretty much what was originally spoken, although we sort of cleaned it up grammatically a little bit. He actually went a little too far, saying, all our nightmares are being realized. I thought that was a little bit purple. This is a really nice shot because your eye is automatically drawn to the yum, and you don't really look at the tower and the ship in the background.
The Shinjuku district have gone down, sir.
Isolate our main computer.
Yes, sir.
Sir, the anti-hacking programs crashed too.
And the main computer KDO has also gone down.
Again, the CGI is really coming into play here, especially on display screens. This is really nice stuff, and it's not the sort of thing that they were doing in the 60s because they just didn't have the capability of it.
Yes, sir.
And so these readouts are really cool, and I think add a lot to the picture. Again, Hattori's music here, really, really beautiful.
I'll be damned.
It's hacking City Tower's supercomputer. It'll soak up every last bit of data.
And the intrepid Yuki, going where no one else is supposed to go. And here she's basically asserting herself a little more. I mean, as you can see, Io has sort of faded out of the action now, and now she's sort of coming into their own as they sort of basically cross, and she becomes a little bit more demonstrative. I think, and from this point on, she almost is sort of insult-free, although we do bring back Imbecile one more time after it's been forgotten for a while. But she is trying to do something useful.
Use the linkage tracer to visualize the access route.
Yes, sir.
Here's the linkage tracer display. Again, really nice. It's very simple, but it's very effective. And again, on the big screen, it has a lot more impact.
It tells a story.
Yes.
Really easily.
Again, absolutely.
That's what's great about the old Godzilla films.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's not the Norman Conquest, but at least it is a narrative-driven movie, and you don't see that too often nowadays. People are just making scenes for the sake of scenes.
I can't believe it. This could be.
Here's Miyazaki taking it big.
You really call this civilization? Anything we don't understand?
In the original track, Shinoda is saying, "You scientists with your insatiable lust for knowledge." And I'm sitting here, no, aren't you the scientist with the insatiable lust for knowledge? So obviously that had to be changed.
Silence works the best.
Yeah. This, again, very nice shot. I like the fact that you can see the lights of the city reflected on the underside of the ship. It's a nice little detail that some people might not have thought of. Suzuki did good work here. We're just sitting here drinking this in, ladies and gentlemen. And now they're going to plant the bombs. It's wonderful the way they just cavalierly take the tallest building in Tokyo. Say, sure, let's blow it up. What the hell?
How long do you need to set up the bombs?
Half hour, tops.
And to pull out?
10 minutes. That ought to be plenty.
Shinoda.
Well, it's about time I got
Yuki
through.
asserting herself, and of course, now she's being Lois Lane and has to go be rescued.
Now listen. Get out of there immediately. You hear me? Katagiri's up to something.
Are you crazy? No way I'm gonna leave now. We gotta know why they're interested in Godzilla. I'll call you back later.
The oxygen content?
Yeah, we took that
there?
out because, for the most part, because it just didn't seem to make. And as he rushes out to strangle the imbecile, Here comes the army leaping into action, and Hattori's music is really nice here. This is the kind of solid, intense music that the scene really requires. We didn't feel the need to change it.
What about in the original one, how he called her his dumbass assistant?
Right, we took that out because, again, that was confusing. I love this shot through the windshield, you know, really nice here, especially as you see as the bridge goes by. And yeah, I mean, they just, you know, you never knew what she was. I mean, by this point, we knew she was a reporter, but she was definitely not his assistant. This is nice here with the piano and the timpani before it. It really sets a mood. And,
I like the shotgun shots we put in when we put it into the ground, these blasters.
Yeah. I love all those abandoned meals on the tables, too. Everybody just got up and ran out.
When the alien ship landed.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me of the old Jackie Mason routine about, you know, people in Israel. They love it when there might be an air raid because that way they can run out of the restaurant without paying the check. Is that a bomb? Is that a bomb? Let's go! And again, some really nice sound effects work here. And here comes the last character of any substance. His name is Okawa. He's the officer in charge. And Darren, you made an interesting note here that even I didn't pick up on.
He runs and he looks at his start mark. Check it out right here.
Hey, listen to me. Your mother's in the building.
I love the deception here.
He's right on his mark.
They're right on top of it. Okawa here is played by Sakai Kimura, another veteran character actor who was actually one of the climbers in a Kurosawa's Dreams. And he's the third character dubbed by Dana Lee.
We had to throw an effect there to trigger him running past the guard.
Right. It's a great scene because it shows that they're just thinking on their feet. They're just immediately coming up with anything.
Come on, we gotta get out now.
Now this is another example of how important it is to tighten the pauses between dialogue. I mean, the clock is ticking, and they're just staring at each other.
Yeah,
you know?
this scene probably ran twice as long as it does now, and we didn't take out really very much dialogue, if any at all.
Just
but
a
it was
couple.
just
yeah, go ahead.
Just pauses in between, and it was a long scene when, as you're saying, the clock is ticking, and we need to pick things up and get them going.
Right. Yeah, we took out a couple of stray references to the oxygen content because we had just removed all that because it really wasn't making much sense. But otherwise, it's all there. But the scene plays much quicker and much better now. And look how everybody has now repaired to the rooftop, where they have the one skyscraper in Shinjuku that everybody instinctively knows will not be destroyed. And
well, isn't it the CCI headquarters?
Yeah. How do they know Godzilla isn't going to trash it?
Because they wrote the movie.
Yes, Godzilla did have his copy of the script.
I love that computer graphic of where all the bombs are placed
Yeah.
in that in the building. I don't know who came up with that so quickly, but somebody really.
And here comes my fourth and final vocal appearance as the driver. Sa! I don't think we did too many takes on that one. And I think I have a yes sa later on. And then that's it for my vocal participation.
Who gave them access?
Katagiri, very snappy dresser with the shirt and tie matching. The
always impeccable.
The Regis Philbin look.
Clear the area immediately.
Doesn't quite match, but.
I don't think Katagiri has a girlfriend.
Ooh! You think he and Miyasaka have a little something going on there, huh? And once again, Io jumping right in, you know, my dad. So now it's, before my mother was in the building, now it's my daddy's in the building, but at least now she doesn't have to lie. And I love how Darren, you know, he's got an old-fashioned analog watch, so you just put in the ticking. Once again, one of those good old-fashioned movie cliches that you just miss.
Postpone the detonation.
It's fun. We wanted to make this movie fun. That was part of the sound.
Without question.
Principles we were going after.
Now here we bring back the flowers line, and which we had planted earlier, no pun intended.
Looks
and
like I'm gonna
always gets a hiss, which is exactly what we wanted. It's a nice touch. And of course, we were very fortunate that Shiro Sano, the expression on his face matches that kind of a line. So it really was an effective little bit of rewriting.
And if anyone thinks the numbers he's punching are not right, they are.
Yeah.
They're
For some reason, yeah, they're in reverse order, because that always fooled me too. Now here's a really important moment in the film, because this is the point at which Yuki and Io have finally bonded. You know, all the animosity is gone, because Io thinks, oh God, my daddy's going to die, and what can she do? And here is where JP really came through for us. This is a lovely piece of music that Hattori wrote, but it stays the same throughout the entire scene. And when Yuki slams on the brakes and makes the decision to turn around and go back, we needed a shift in the music. So JP just wrote something very, very subtle, but more upbeat. And when you hear the cymbals clanging, that's where his new music comes in. Lisa Richardson, our wonderful music editor, put that together so subtly that unless it was pointed out to you, as I just did, you wouldn't even notice that the music had changed and it was two different composers.
Yeah, he did that. He actually augmented a couple of different music cues, just like that in the movie, and he did such a great job.
Yeah, and he did it on a hideously short schedule. I mean, he did everything in, I think, about 10 days. I love that weird sound you put for the bombs. It almost sounds like people screaming, you know, in pain. There, and
lighting up.
Now here's an interesting line I rewrote. Originally, Io says, "My daddy's in the building." Well, we knew that, so I changed it to, "I gotta save him," which sort of fits into that whole precocious personality, like she's the only one that can do anything about it.
And also, she's his caretaker.
Right.
Don't do it!
I'm particularly proud of that little change. Abe, just that great stare of his. Now, what exactly was that sound with the bomb, with the sound of like people and souls in hell crying out?
It's getting ready, the fires from hell, getting ready to blast.
Yeah. Some nice pyrotechnics here. You'll notice that the women are not hit by debris. It's a nice smoke effect. And here's a very subtle touch that Suzuki did. If you'll notice, from here on, the bottom of the ship is no longer shiny silver. It's almost as if they had blasted the paint right off of it, and it's now sort of a flat kind of pink. Now here's a key editing change that you made, Mike, which I think really enhances the film greatly. With the intercutting.
In the original version, all these pieces obviously were there, but they weren't organized. And I thought what the director was going for was probably that the explosion would sort of chase him down the elevator shaft the way it is here. And we sort of rearranged some shots and took some out and sped things up a little bit. And I think it works a little bit better this way than as opposed to the way it was originally.
Yeah, there was virtually no intercutting. It was the building blew up and then he slid down. And by going back and forth, I really enhanced, I think, the scene.
And also how we left Shinoda now. You don't know if he dies or not.
Right. We took out one shot of him trying to kick open the screen because Okawa wanted to preserve the mystery of whether he survived or not, which of course begs the question, why did you put that shot in there in the first place?
I hear something.
As though anybody's really going to think that he
And of course, as you can
died.
see, it's a full 32 seconds later when Shinoda's back. And so here is the big tearful reunion. And the family unit is now essentially complete. There's a nice detail. You can see he does have his hand bandaged from the slide down the elevator cable. Some people might have not bothered with that little detail.
Right.
I remember I was having dinner with Jackie Chan once, and I asked him about the slide down the lights in the mall and Police Story, and he was talking about how his hands were all cut up after he did it. And I said, why didn't you just wear gloves? And he said, we didn't think of it. Oh, here comes your favorite line, Darren.
Yeah.
And the lipstick is perfect, you know.
This hug here really didn't work at all. This was the worst part of the not knowing their backstory when we first saw the movie.
Yeah, you know, the hug seems way over the top, and then when you realize that they've known each other, then it makes sense. The reason for the nice try asshole is basically Katagiri tried to kill him, and as the movie stood, not only does the Shinoda not acknowledge it, but he actually tries to save Katagiri 20 minutes later. And I'm a saint, and I wouldn't have done that. And I thought we needed to address it somehow and do it in the strongest possible terms that would still be acceptable for network television, because we didn't want to have any bleepable words on the track. And asshole seemed to fit. And it always gets a good reaction. And besides, if it's good enough for George W. Bush, it's good enough for Shinoda, right?
Something without form can take on another one.
Now here is where we took out some of the references to the Millennium. There were a few stray references to the Millennium here and there, and we basically took them out because it never really panned out, and also, you know, it's by the time this movie came out in theaters, in most people's minds, the Millennium had already happened, and we didn't want the movie to seem dated. Here is the first instance of Ifukube, Akira Ifukube, his music. This is the Godzilla Rampage theme. Ifukube composed the music for the very first Godzilla picture back in '54 and many since. And it is, in essence, the equivalent of the James Bond theme. It doesn't matter who the composer of the movie is, you always have the Ifukube themes. And here we are among the miniature sets.
Which are just amazing. If you look at them in some scenes, there's people inside of the windows that are moving sometimes.
Yeah. The detail is astonishing.
It's pretty amazing.
I mean, it really is kind of a lost art because they just don't bother with it anymore in America. They just, you know, do everything CGI. It's what Kenny Tran, the LA Times, called that pleasant, familiar, old-fashioned home cooking approach. And I think that's part of the charm of these pictures, is that it is practical. You know, you sort of sense subconsciously it's a miniature. And it's a guy in a rubber suit, and that's what makes the difference. Nice little cut Mike made there, you know, what's on Godzilla's mind to a close-up of Godzilla. It wasn't originally that way.
No, I think it either cut to this shot or a shot like this originally, and we decided that cutting straight to his close-up, we could see what's on his mind.
Exactly.
And the music theme here is great.
Now this is the Godzilla March, which is actually the main title of the original Godzilla movie. These are the two Ifukube pieces that were in the picture when we were given it. We added some more.
That's a great shot there.
Yeah.
Where,
this nice long shot. Yeah. And again, some of this probably went on too long, but you know, we just didn't want to cut any of it. It's just so well done, and you didn't want to lose the music either. And it is sort of a build-up. It's almost like, you know, the heavyweight championship fight, and he's walking down the aisle toward the ring. This is not one of the better miniatures, I'm sorry to say, but they can't all be winners.
That's another shot that could have been taken out, but
yeah, but
it's, it's sort of campy, Godzilla-esque.
And it's not about the people anymore.
Right.
Godzilla's going to save the city from the alien.
I love this. He's saying, "Come on, you bastard. I'm ready. Let's do it."
Try and blow your horn.
And there's a great sound effect you did again. Now, in the original version, when the cables start coming out of the ground, there was no music, and we decided to leave it that way because I thought the scene really played better without music. Sometimes, you know, it's almost a distraction. And I think it's really effective. And I think this is one of the best cut scenes in the entire picture. This whole thing where these things just sort of take on a life of their own and wrap themselves around Godzilla. I don't think we touch this at all.
No, this actually was very well done, and it's pretty interesting. I've never seen anything like this before, and it was we just left it the way it was. It's very well done.
Yeah. Well, we beefed up the sound effects, of course, but
I mean,
but visually, right. No, we didn't touch it at all. It's an excellent. You know, it's just staggering when you think of. I love this shot. You know, all this incredible miniature work, and you know, God forbid the film jams on the camera. What do they do? You know, they can't have too many backups for these things. The cables, of course, are CGI, but those are real. This is a really good bit of staging here.
Yeah, this whole pulling through
Yeah.
and smashing the city.
Sound is great too. Boy, the stage when we
Yeah.
mixed this thing, the
Oh,
stage
yeah.
just
Yeah.
shook.
I think my hearing, I think I lost about another 10%
Yeah,
while
it
we
was
were
just
on
great.
doing the final mix, because I always seem to be standing next to the speaker when we got blasted.
All right, this whole part of the movie is just constant action.
Right. I mean, the actors are pretty much done here, you know. Now, once again, the original music was, again, the main Hattori theme stated, and again, at a slower tempo than it should have been. So we just let JP loose and said, write us some good old-fashioned knockdown, drag-out battle music, and he really came through.
Once again, the retro sound of fire blasting the chains off the wires.
Yeah. Oh, the clang of the tail against the metal here. That was a wonderful sound effect. A lot of people commented on that. And there's a nice little whoosh as it writes itself. This is some really crackerjack effects work here. I mean, you really get a sense of the size of the city. And then there's that sort of electric razor type thing. This is the MS Godzilla movie. It's just the two guys blasting each other. You know, no rhyme, no reason. And it's amazing the variety of angles that they seem to come up with, especially considering the limitations of working with miniature sets and camera placement. Because this thing had to fill up a soundstage easily. But Okawa always seems to find new and fresh angles. And it's never static, and it's certainly never dull. Another Independence Day echo there. There goes the Fox Plaza, ladies and gentlemen. It's that same architecture. The Fox Plaza, for those of you who don't live in Los Angeles, is the building that was used in the first Die Hard movie. And the architecture of that has been widely imitated ever since. And now Regenerator G1 comes into play. We're back to Hattori's music now, which is very pretty and a little bit spooky. And it seems to fit the moment.
The tentacles again.
The shot upcoming where he's sort of withdrawing the DNA out of Godzilla. There's this one shot that sort of reminds me a little bit of the Night on Bald Mountain sequence of Fantasia. That one right there, where like the spirits are coming out of the grave almost. Our real adversary is about to make his debut.
The expression on Katagiri's face in the last two shots of him, 2 or 3 shots, it's just priceless. His eyes are about to bug out of his head, and it's the kind of thing that you don't notice until you've seen this movie about 50 times.
Right.
But it's pretty funny.
Yeah, it's a really nice performance.
Yeah.
I mean, he basically has one expression through the whole movie, and he sticks with it, and he really makes it a part of the character. Now, this is sort of the child Orga. Orga is the name of the monster, although it's never actually uttered in the movie itself. We believe it's short for organism, but your guess is as good as ours.
John Adams, one of our effects editors, sound effects editors, his daughter is part of the voice for Orga.
Right. She's about 5, something like that.
5, 6.
Yeah. Yeah. We just grabbed sound effects and manufactured them any way we could. I mean, you had dozens and dozens of tracks. In fact, I remember Jimmy Honorate saying, "You're overloading this. It's not going to hold." But boy, did it hold. I mean, you see this in a good theater with a good sound system with all 8 channels pumping, and it's an overwhelming audio experience.
What's going on?
its regenerator
Ed Lockman, our dialogue editor, really pushed hard to really get all this together, and I want to give him some kudos. He did a wonderful job.
Absolutely. I mean, that was what made working on this picture such a joy, was that everybody was so enthusiastic and as well as talented, and they really seemed to enjoy their work, and we were working long hours, well into the night sometime, and people actually were volunteering. You know, John Taylor and Greg Orloff said, hell yeah, we'll stay late, because we knew we were on a schedule that would make Roger Corman weep.
Yeah, I wanted to mention also John Taylor and Greg Orloff, because they were so great to work with, and they worked on this so hard, and no detail was overlooked.
Yeah.
Those were the sound mixers. They really did a great job.
Yeah, astounding. It's you know, there's a wealth of detail in here that a lot of people missed and probably will always miss, but we know it's there, and that's what's important.
And you, of course, Michael Schlesinger, you made this project come to life, and your passion for it was truly inspirational for us to see you have this kind of feeling about a movie, because most movie makers don't have that kind of passion.
Yeah. Well, I think that's probably one of the reasons I was put in charge, is that I am a fan, and they knew that I would treat it well. Here, incidentally, is the first new Ifukube cue, which JP brilliantly integrated into his music. It's actually a variation on the Godzilla Rampage theme, although it's technically from the opening titles of Godzilla vs. the Thing, or Mothra vs. Godzilla, to give it its original title. And this is the adult Orga, now played by, gotta check my notes, Makoto Ito. And he looks a little bit like Predator. Some people thought he actually looked like the Godzilla of the Roland Emmerich version and wondered if that was deliberate. I mean, there may be some resemblance. I mean, now we're back to JP's original music again. But, you know, when you're dealing with, you know, lizard-like creatures, there's always going to be some kind of resemblance. And here's the money shot of these two giant guys just clobbering each other about miniature sets. And the electrical flashes going on. Just, again, one of those nice little grace notes that some people might not have bothered with. Oh, there was an editing that we couldn't do anything about. When he cut to the close-up of Godzilla reeling back, Orga's claw is not in the shot.
There's no claw, but
there was nothing we could do to fix that.
We futzed with that cut a little bit, and that works pretty well if you disregard the fact that the claw is no longer there.
Yes. You know. I like this shot. It's sort of like they're ganging up on him now. I mean, you think the spaceship has been destroyed, but there's just enough of it left to keep going. And now they're going to double team Godzilla. And he's not too happy here, but, you know, frees himself from that apartment building and says, come on, baby.
Now he's getting mad.
Now you've annoyed him. What was Raymond Burr's great line in Godzilla 85? No, atomic weapons would only annoy and confuse Godzilla. Some of the campier dialogue we tried to avoid. Although we did leave a few things in just because it was expected, and it is part of the quaint charm of these things. And again, a new roar. You know, the original roar was a lot weaker. It almost sounded, you know, like, ooh, that's got to leave a mark. The original roar really didn't. It seemed almost like from a small animal in a way, you know. Didn't, you know.
Definitely. I mean, now it's made up of like each different voice from each character is made up of at least 30 different sounds.
Yeah. And we should point out that you created the new Godzilla roar. I mean, you made these from scratch, inspired by the original Godzilla roar. Some people thought that we had reused the roar from the Emmerich version, but we did not, because we actually...
We didn't use any of the Emmerichs.
No, I don't think we even had the ability
footsteps. To. Yeah, we
everything
we created
was new.
Everything from what the original stuff was like from the original Godzilla.
Right. And, you know, the radioactive breath stuff is especially effective at night here. This is some really beautiful camera work. Ooh. And there goes that bridge. You know, the one thing that's never brought up in Godzilla movie is, like, insurance companies. You know, don't they just finally, after a while, say, you know, hell with it, man. I'm getting out of the business. As soon as we rebuild, they destroy it again. I mean, I'm sure the contractors are happy, but...
This is a funny shot. It's Godzilla's so pumped up here.
Yeah.
You can see he's
like
just so
dancing.
excited.
Right.
Nice tail.
Yeah. Again, there's a lot of personality, that is only possible when you have a human being inside a suit. I mean, you just can't get that in a CGI character.
That
Takes out a little neighborhood here.
Yeah.
Didn't really think about it, but
a little tail whip.
Yeah, the tail movement here is really good. I should also point out that Godzilla has been reduced in size back to where he originally was, which was about 55 meters tall. Because in the more recent films, he just kept getting bigger and bigger until he got so big that the character just became unwieldy. And so for this picture, they reduced him in size back to where he originally was, and it's a little more realistic.
And the fight goes on.
Music here is really good. JP did some great stuff here.
I was just going to mention that he really built that up.
He's trying to become a Godzilla clone.
It's true we could have tightened this up a little bit. This fight goes on for a long time, but we discussed it, and there's not a whole lot of action fighting, scenes in this movie, and we wanted to leave it here. So we did some tightening up here, but not a whole lot.
Yeah, I think there was a mismatched shot or two that we cleaned up, but we really left it pretty much alone. Although, from what I understand on the next picture, Godzilla vs. Megaguirus, there are 3 separate fight sequences, 3 different neighborhoods. So, and Megaguirus is a kind of a transformer kind of monster where he changes his appearance with each fight. So I think Toho took, the criticism to heart that there wasn't enough monster action in this picture, and are making up for it in the next one. And so there'll be plenty of urban renewal continuing in the city of Tokyo. Again, the use of red lighting here is very nice. And again, the slow reveal, sort of building up the suspense. And again, the eerie motif that JP created for the saucer a little earlier is now brought back again, as we see. Orga is definitely on the ropes.
Flesh hanging and all.
Yeah, it's a nice touch.
He's beginning to realize he's not happy in his line of work.
They're just beat.
Yeah.
The music is perfect too.
And as you can see, the wavering there, that's the CGI as he is healing himself. The regenerator G1 is doing its job. In this shot, you can really see that in the redesigned Godzilla suit that the dorsal fins are actually a little bit on the purple side. Also, Godzilla really is green. I mean, if you actually go back and look at the previous Godzilla movies, he is in fact gray, and people have always said he was green, but he was gray. But this time, he really is green. Now here comes the oddest thing in the movie. This is, I guess, inspired perhaps by Alien, but and Godzilla's looking, what the hell is this?
Yeah, he's not sure what to make of that.
Some people have interpreted his reactions here as that he was actually being hypnotized by Orga, but I don't know. He does look a little dazed.
He gets an idea and then just goes for it here.
This is really bizarre. I mean, you can read whatever sexual symbolism in it you want to, and we will not contradict you. This does strike me as a little bit of stupidity on Orga's part, because yes, he wants to absorb Regenerator G1, but having felt firsthand Godzilla's hot breath, it seems to me that having Godzilla stick his head down your throat is probably not the most intelligent of moves.
Well, he's been asleep for 60 million years.
Yeah, well, he should be plenty well rested. And now here again, this is something that was in the original track and we replicated. As the music builds up to its intensity, but as we get right to the moment, we told the JP, pull it all the way back and no music at all. And so when it lights up, all you hear is the power.
Maybe Orga doesn't have a memory.
That could be, or maybe it got roasted by that last attack. But you can even see in his eyes here, he's beginning to think, uh-oh, whoops.
Some of the effects in this movie are actually very good.
Yeah, a lot of the CGI here is very well done. I mean, a lot of people were criticizing it. You know, maybe it's not up to ILM standards, but I would say it's fine for what it is.
That's the whole thing. What it is, it's like, it's a movie. It's entertaining. It's fun. Period.
And once again, the slow reveal as the flames part, and we see that our hero has saved the day. This usually gets a nice cheer from the audience. Now, once again, here's another interesting little cut we made. Godzilla basically does a version of the old Max Sennett gag where your adversary is basically stiff, and then you go, and then he just topples over. And that's sort of what he does here, except instead of blowing on him, he roars. But in the original version, it was like about 4 or 5 seconds before Orga starts to topple over. So it would have been great to have him actually fall over on the roar. But you see on the right side of the screen, Godzilla's mouth is closed. So we actually had to wait until his mouth closed before we could send Orga toppling over. But the gag still works.
Yeah, I think it works. And he does a little end zone dance here.
Yeah. The roars are really good here. This is a great shot here, watching him in the distance as everybody looks on. That's really well done. That's a frameable shot. And you can see the tail still moving in the background. Again, a lot of detail. Now we're back to Hattori's music. Now, if you look closely, you see the ashes falling down. Those are actually CGI, although the rest of it is probably real.
Boy, that's ironic. It woke up after 60 million years, and then Godzilla destroyed it the very next day.
Yeah.
Actually, I blew that. 2 days have passed, but we can't be perfect.
Godzilla's coming!
Now, so many people couldn't understand why Katagiri allows himself to be killed, but, it's fairly simple. I mean, he realizes he screwed up. I mean, he spent the entire picture trying to kill Godzilla, and Godzilla was the only thing that stood between Orga and the aliens taking over the Earth. And in Japan, when you have shamed and disgraced yourself, there's only one thing to do, and that's harakiri. Except instead of a sword, he uses Godzilla. This is my favorite moment in the movie. Pulls out the Luckies and the Zippo. What panache. It's a great moment.
I've never seen Godzilla this close before.
And you really get a sense of the enormity of Godzilla here. This is a very nice setup here. And, and it's obvious that Godzilla is a creature of intelligence because he instinctively knows that Katagiri was trying to kill him and that everybody else was like, well, no, he's okay.
Leave me.
So here's his one chance to be rescued, and no, leave me. And then for the big final Godzilla, Ron Ewan came up with one incredibly long Godzilla, and originally we had one of the other takes, but I said, no, we've got to go for the long take, and here it is. Cranked up and with the reverb poured on. Greg Orloff looked at me after we ran it through and said, hey, you're right, it's great. He's an over-the-top villain. He deserves an over-the-top death. Now, I really like this. I know we had some discussion about this. I wanted to pull back all the sound except for the music, make it a nice little poetic climax. And you said, can't we leave some of the sound effects? And I said, no, I want just music. And, of course, the dialogue. And I think it's really effective. In fact, some guy on one of the news groups actually wrote that this scene seemed like it had been directed by Terrence Malick or Francis Coppola. And I thought, wow, that's some compliment.
And ever since, we tried to destroy him.
Miyazaki and Yuki here are sort of voicing what the average American who's probably seeing his first Godzilla movie is saying. Why does he keep protecting us? After we keep trying to kill him, you know, the Godzilla fans know the answer to this, but other people don't. And I thought it was important to sort of bring that up because, again, it's you know, asking the question that's on everybody's mind. I really like this. And here comes the much derided final line of the movie, but it is the original dialogue.
Godzilla is inside each one of us.
And what better way to end the picture? Now, we had originally... Now, here's the final new Ifukube cue. It's the monster's attack theme, first used in Ghidorah, the three-headed monster. And we wanted to create an end title and actually put in the end with a big old question mark, just like in the good old days. But unfortunately, the wrong font was used, and we got sort of cartoony lettering instead of the heavy black letters I wanted. So Toho wasn't crazy about it either, so we decided not to use it for the video version, which is why you didn't see it. You just see Godzilla blasting his ring of fire, marking his territory, as it were. Some people have said, well, if he's really protecting us, why is he burning up the city? And, you know, I have no idea. You know, he's Godzilla.
I think he's showing them that, don't mess with me, I need to do what I need to do.
Exactly. You know, and we know that Shinjuku has been pretty much abandoned by now. So, we're back into the Godzilla March, which we heard earlier in the picture. I thought it'd be nice to go from an Ifukube cue to an Ifukube cue. It works very well. And then Lisa Richardson did a really nice job of dovetailing it into the Hattori music, which will be upcoming shortly, and which is what really ended the closing credits. We have obviously had to extend them to make name for all the Americans who worked on it. And I just wanted to point out one other thing as talking about that is that one of the things that the most important thing to me, at least, was that I really wanted to use Asian American actors to re-loop this picture because, I mean, even if they weren't speaking with accents, the timbre of their voice is still different, and I think you hear it, you know, subconsciously, if not consciously. And we didn't get people who were necessarily people who go in and loop, although they do. I mean, these are real actors who actually do work as often as they can. It's not easy when you're an Asian American actor to get work. And they were as talented and as enthusiastic and as creative a bunch as it's ever been my pleasure to work with. And they all really knocked themselves out to do a great job. And I wanted to tip my hat to all of them. And they should be hired a lot more often because they're really terrific. Well, we're down to about the last couple of minutes, and you guys want to add anything?
Well, I think this was a really interesting movie to work on because we really could almost do whatever we wanted to. We could rewrite dialogue. We could sort of take out what we wanted to and pump up what we wanted to with dialogue. And in that sense, it's really unique.
And we should add that Toho did have to approve everything, so we didn't have complete carte blanche. But they were very good about letting us do it.
It was very collaborative. Everything, all of our efforts that we really worked on, we really worked as a team. And,
absolutely.
That was really wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not one of these people who comes in and says you're going to do it my way or else. I mean, you know, I think film is a collaborative medium, and I think you welcome input from anybody. We were constantly rewriting dialogue on the ADR stage if we could make it fit better or if it sounded better. We did a lot of alternate takes, you know, everything, even to try and make the lip sync match better, which we didn't always succeed. But, you know, Japanese phonetically is a lot less like English than, say, French or Spanish. So we did the best we could, but, yeah, we weren't always successful. And I want to acknowledge again my old buddy Glenn Shin, who was absolutely indispensable all through the ADR and the casting. He was just fantastic. And Masaharu Ina, the head of Toho's LA office, he was an absolute brick. He understood exactly what we wanted to do and stood by us every step of the way. And certainly my boss, Jeff Blake, who made the decision to release the film theatrically and also the decision to put me in charge of it. And that's a debt that can never be repaid. Oh, here come your credits, guys. And again, this only represents a fraction of the people who worked on this picture. But everybody who worked on it did a tremendous job, and we tip their hat to our hat to them.
I'd like to thank
if
Ryan
I had
Quigley.
a hat.
Ryan Quigley was my assistant on this. Did just an amazing job. Did a great job at it.
And the last thing we did, we added one little Godzilla roar toward the end. You know, just as a sort of a sign-off for the 4 people who actually sat all the way through the end credits.
And anybody who appreciates that we kept this in this sort of spirit of Godzilla. You've got Mike Schlesinger to thank.
Oh, well, that's nice.
Kudos.
Thank you. And there's the Pegasus, so thanks for listening. So long. Arigato.